So we will have some questions from me. I will start, but I invite everybody to think of some questions for our excellent panel that we can ask afterwards as well. We have about 20 minutes for the discussion today. So my first question to the panel is, what are the particular challenges you face with regards to meaningful participation of citizens in the energy transition project? And do you have any examples of good lessons on how we can overcome them? And we'll start with Minister Martin.
Thank you very much. And I think I've been teed up very nicely by Christian, who said, speak to the Scots. But all is not perfect by any means. I mean, we very much feel as a government, but as a society, that when we are hosting the green energy infrastructure, that communities not only should benefit from that, but they should be involved very early on the decisions around that. And the way that our licensing works and it has that built in the consultation with local communities ahead of any licenses being given to actually develop. We've got a number of things which haven't actually required us to change law as such, because it's very much almost a kind of social contract, really, with developers. We have agreements with onshore. We have an onshore wind sector deal, which we just signed recently, which very much at the core of it is about community benefits between onshore wind developers and the communities that are playing host to that infrastructure. But the thing is that the challenges around that are that, you know, you'll have the good guys who sign up to that, but you'll have other people that don't sign up to that. And I think that the unfortunate thing is that in the past we've had a legacy of onshore wind developers who have promised things to communities, maybe this first generation of wind farms who have promised things to communities, and a small amount of them have kind of like put their infrastructure in place and not actually fulfilled any of the promises. And what happens is that when the next developer comes along who might have actually some really good ideas into how to engage with the community and what benefits they might want to offer, well, they're having a real problem, because they're having to overturn that very negative view of their industry that those communities have experienced in the past. We very much have placed at the centre of the onshore wind sector deal is that the developers must have a partnership working with communities and local authorities, in particular the local councils, to actually make sure that the community benefits that they offer is actually the communities will decide what those benefits are. Now, the inherent problem in that, if I can be maybe slightly cheeky, is that in the past, or in fact not just the past but in the present, it can very much be certain sections of that community making the decisions on what those benefits will be. So I am not entirely sure how democratic it actually is. Let me give you a perspective. So if this was 20 years ago and it was my community that was maybe playing host to an onshore wind farm, and I have 2 children under 5, and I have absolutely no capacity whatsoever to be involved in meetings at 7 o'clock at night or be part of the community council. The community council is full of retired people who are making decisions on my behalf. And no one has actually ever asked me, as I'm sort of juggling family life and whatever, what I want in my community. That is the danger there. You know, it's the volunteers, it's the people who have time, and they tend to not exactly be representative of some communities in the past. So one of my asks of the developers is to find real more meaningful ways to make it very democratic. Another challenge is that what kind of community benefits can be offered? Well, one of the things that's really facing our country at the moment is fuel poverty, and rural fuel poverty in particular. It will be rural areas that are playing host to a lot of this infrastructure, but they have the highest fuel poverty in the whole of the UK. So they are rightly asking, well, I've got all this infrastructure in my back garden, my beautiful unspoilt places of Scotland that I live and work, but I can't afford to put my heating on, you know? So the market mechanisms of the UK energy market is against them, and it's very difficult to translate any community benefits into household benefit. So there's some of the challenges.
Thank you very much, Minister. Permanent Secretary.
Yeah. I'm here on behalf of Kalistat Lund, who is the Minister of Agriculture, Self-Sufficiency, Energy and Environment. So I'm going to read, since I'm just a permanent secretary. Yeah, thank you for the invitation to speak about citizens' engagement in the green transition in Greenland. In the Greenlandic democracy, we want to ensure openness, transparency, and listen to our citizens. Engagement and involvement of the people is very important to enable the green transition. This does not only raise the level of understanding and support of the energy projects, but it also establishes important trust and respect from the people. Greenland, as you might all know, is the biggest island on the Earth. And we have a lot of land and very few people. And often hydropower plants are placed on a long distance away from our local communities. So we don't have the same challenges as you see especially in other Nordic countries. But this means that our hydropower energy projects do not affect our local people directly. In contrast to experiences in other countries, we don't encounter big challenges or concerns with new green energy projects. But however, our people, our citizens, as we are Inuit, fishing and hunting are very important. So is nature and wildlife. In that respect, establishing new renewable energy constructions might affect specific areas for fishing and hunting. Although experiences have showed us that the impact are small compared to other places in the world, we do take this seriously, and we engage with the local communities to understand and analyze the potential changes. Great.
Thank you. Chairman?
Thank you. I'm Swedish. I don't use drugs. Just I've said that. I also live in a rural area, and I do it because I want to be there. I want to live in the forest. I like the lakes, the tranquility. So that is very important. You must see and listen to those who are affected. I'm a member of the Swedish Parliament, so I am in Stockholm every week. And for some of my colleagues, it's very easy to sit in Stockholm and then point out that we should build more windmills out in the country. We should have more wolves out in the country. We should stop driving cars and take more public transportation out in the country. But if you do that like an elite, you don't get the acceptance. Therefore, the issue of compensation must be a decisive incentive. And then the compensation for those who really are affected. Of course, they who get their wind turbines on their own land, they got the money. But the neighbors, you must not forget the neighbors. In Sweden, last year, they talked about a proposal that, you should give the municipality a swimming pool or a playground. We saw that on a slide here. And that looks, great. But where will that swimming pool be situated? Not in the village where the windmills are. It will be in the center of the municipality. And in addition, how will a swimming pool help me with the lower value of my property? It doesn't help at all. So there are so many angles that you must see in this. So yes, it is difficult, but you must talk to those who are affected. You must meet them in eye level. You can't just run over them and dismiss them because you don't agree with them. That's the most important.
When you say talk to them, where does that consultation level go? Is it we talk to them, we tell them what's going to happen? Or is it we talk to them and we give them the veto right over this project?
Yeah, you must engage them. And maybe you can find a solution. Then it's fine. Maybe you can. But you can't just talk to them and then, okay, now we are ready, then we go on.
Thank you. I think we discussed some challenges that exist about how do we find that consensus. So I wonder if the panel can share any specific examples of either things going badly wrong or some success stories in citizen participation in energy projects. And we'll start with Lund.
Yeah, and I realised that I forgot to point to some of the sort of success stories, and I'm standing here thinking, well, I just came away with all the challenges, and I'm not really being given a very kind of like fair appraisal. One of the things that, and it comes back to the community benefits that have already existed, is some have been excellent and some have not been so excellent and not been so democratic, and some I think have maybe the reputation of being slightly tokenistic as well. So aside from the issues around the sort of democratic decisions around made from this, we almost the phrase sometimes that comes out when we're talking about the community benefits in Scotland is there's only so many times you can paint a scout hut. You know, there's only so many play parks that you can put in a community. What does this mean for all the people of the community? What, you know, how do they get involved? One of the, I would actually like to point to some examples, not just of onshore wind, but of offshore wind that are actually happening right now that I've been able to visit during my time as Minister. I've only been Minister since March this year. But already I am seeing a difference in how, or I'm certainly seeing firsthand how some developers are really working with communities in a very meaningful way. And I'm going to point to a couple. We have H100 in Fife. H100 is a scheme that aims to pilot domestic hydrogen. And that is run by Scottish Gas Networks, and they are actually effectively building a housing estate that is going to be powered by hydrogen. They've got an electrolyser plant nearby. They've got other households signed up to that. They're working with the local colleges, they're working with the communities. They've been involved in the communities well before they actually built this scheme, and they're getting people signed up to participate in this scheme, which is going to be a pilot project, which will then we're proving that domestic hydrogen can work. But they've got real close connections with the local college. So they've got apprenticeship schemes involved in that. They've really embedded themselves in the sort of wider community, particularly with young people, and also offering local jobs as well. And I think that's one of the things that really, really helps, because if, you know, you're and going into schools and colleges is fine, and that's great. But if the young people in those schools and colleges know that their parents are actually getting a job out of this as well, particularly in communities that maybe have a bit of social deprivation, like, you know, in Fife where H100 is, then that makes all the difference. Another one, more in my area of Scotland, in the northeast of Scotland, is the Moray East wind farm, which has only just become, I think the first turbine's become operational in the last couple of months. What they've done is they've put money into regenerating the harbour. So this is in Buckie, a place called Buckie. Now Buckie, if anyone knows Buckie, it's been a fish processing, big fishing history. It's had social deprivation issues. It's really northeast. It's kind of far away from Aberdeen. It's quite difficult to get to. It can often feel that it's left behind. Now I visited there, and effectively they have ploughed money into the harbour that they need to use in order to have the crews going out servicing this. But they have employed local people, they have trained up local young people from the schools, and they have transformed and are still to transform even more of that waterfront area. So Buckie looks nicer. It is able to attract more businesses to that. It's having a meaningful and tangible impact on that community. And no one has said to them in law that they have to do that. They know it makes good sense. They are here to stay in the community, and they have actually put their money where their mouth is and actually spent money in infrastructure in that town. And those are two really good examples where there's been real pride and buy-in. And I'll also mention Seagreen in Montrose. Same thing. Montrose, sort of like more on the kind of like the northeast coast, heading down to between Dundee and Aberdeen. Montrose, big servicing area for oil and gas, worried about the just transition, but host to the first offshore floating wind, which is development, which is just off the coast of Montrose. Money has been ploughed into the infrastructure in the ports there and into the community, and people feel, actually someone told me very recently, just this week, from Montrose, they feel proud of hosting this infrastructure. And they don't have to, they don't feel proud just because they're the first to do anything. They feel proud because the members of those communities are actually involved in that project. And the kids in the schools are starting to do apprenticeships, or looking forward to doing apprenticeships with that company as well. So it's not just about painting scout huts. It's about what the bigger offer is as well, which is good for the company doing it as well.
Thank you. So just a follow-up question, do you think we can always rely on the goodwill of the company
No.
to do good? Or is there a role for maybe a stronger regulation here?
Well, yeah, and the problem, the perennial problem of being a devolved government in the UK is that we don't have all the powers to put things into law. It is always better to not have to put things into law. You know, it's always better to actually have goodwill and social responsibility and a kind of social contract, like I've mentioned. But I think that what developers are maybe seeing is that historically, when they have destroyed goodwill, that it's very hard for them to come back for their next project, you know? So I think there's an understanding. Also, we have Scottish Renewables, which is an industry body that has a membership. And that's almost a kind of, I suppose, a kind of quality mark in terms of, you know, they all want a good reputation for Scottish renewables. There's many renewables type companies involved in that, and it's often the case. And they obviously lobby government, but we also lobby them to do things as well, particularly in the community benefit space. That it's almost like if there's people who are not memberships of that, who are not living up to the expectations of the sector, then that could be problematic. In the UK government could. The UK government could mandate that community benefit has to happen, but they don't seem willing to do that. But I genuinely make the case all the time to every developer, every company that comes in front of me. One of the first questions I will be asking them is, what do you give back to the communities that host you? And some of them are very proud to talk about, and some of them are shuffling their feet. And it's the one that are shuffling their feet, I think, that will have the pressure from the other developers in these Scottish Renewables, whatever, to do the right thing.
Thank you. Permanent Secretary, do you want to share some experiences from Greenland?
Yeah, just shortly. Like in Greenland, it's a bit different because we haven't had these issues within hydropower projects. Beside that, actually, right now we are, I don't know what you call it in English, but it's konkurrenceudsat, a potential hydro energy place in West Greenland, and right now various companies has been looking at it, and so I think this will be the first project within hydropower and the engagement of the citizens. But beside that, we have experiences within mining, and those has also been not always positive. And it's not related to that people live in the areas, but they use the areas as they go hunting and they go berry picking, or they have historic meaning to them. And those are the perspectives which are specifically strong meanings about from the citizens when there are some potential developments. So right now we're also having these questions and issues, and related to that, our minister Lund went to have some public meetings in that area just recently. And it hasn't really started yet, but it's also just to get to that actually people knows that some things are happening, and so they know many years before it's going to happen.
I think it's a very important thing to consider, how do we define community? Sometimes it's a community of place, and it's very easy, like in Klaus's presentation, to just draw a circle around it and that's it. But sometimes it's community of interest or activities. Kjell-Arne.
In my municipality, we have 3 wind parks. When we built the 2 first, I was a member of the municipal council, and there was a very good cooperation with the company, with the landowners, the neighbors, very good process. They promised that, in my municipality we have a canal that goes from the Lake Vänern and up in the forests. They promised that you shouldn't see the windmills from the canal. That was a promise. If you go by boat up there, you can see the windmills almost from everywhere. You said destroyed goodwill. That is destroyed goodwill. So when we went to big park number 3, there was big demonstrations because they promised, but we see the windmills. So you must trust the companies. You must trust the municipality. They have to be honest. They can't just go on and get the parks.
Thank you. I think we have some time for maybe 1 or 2 questions from the audience. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah,
Everybody's
just one all the way in the back.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kjell-Arne. Very good and interesting conversation, which we've had, of course, for years. But I wonder if the only way to do this is between developers and the municipality, and it has to be on a sort of a voluntary basis between those two parties, because I wonder if you start putting things into law. How do you, what is it going to be based on? You know, what I can understand if people are affected by noise, etc. We can put that into law, but when you get into more fuzzier things like these things are too high, or they're too ugly, or anything that is kind of up to an opinion, then what kind of precedents would that set for almost anything we do? If we build a golf course, or if we build a high-rise building in a city, then anyone can have an opinion on that. So how would that, you know, if you're gonna put things like that into law, what kind of precedents are we setting, and what would it be based on? What would be, how would we define the impact that is negative and that we want to avoid and put into law, etc.?
Thank you for your question. And indeed, I think this is something that communities struggle with a lot, is that all of the tangible things are already included in processes like environmental impact assessment, but all of the fuzzy things, as you call them, are not possible to quantify them. And even when it is possible to quantify them, sometimes it's like in a Norwegian case, you know, indigenous knowledge, which sometimes in courts does not hold the same ontological meaning as our traditional Western knowledge, unfortunately. So the question to the panel is, how do we account for fuzzy or subjective things in how we make decisions? Minister.
Yeah, so this is obviously a really pressing issue in a lot of countries, because particularly those that are involved in the sort of transition to renewables in particular. And in my country, of course, we have a lot of oil and gas infrastructure, but a lot of it is out of sight. You know, it's out of sight, it's in the North Sea, it's in the west of Shetland, and the areas in which have got the infrastructures, maybe industrial parks, whatever. The electricity, the green electricity network is going to have to really be massively enhanced in order to be taking all of, particularly the energy coming from floating offshore wind. In Scotland, we have just given licenses options for 28 gigawatts worth. Now, at the moment, the grid and the electricity infrastructure is not sufficient to take anywhere near that from Scotland. So what do we do with this? Well, we have to, first of all, we need to put more infrastructure in place. But it's a very live issue, particularly in rural Scotland, that effectively we're having to put electricity transmission infrastructure from the top of Scotland right down to the central belt and enhance it. And there are campaigns across communities to stop that from happening because of the visual impacts of it. So it's a case of, there's a number of things in there about explaining why that has to happen, as in, if you care about the environment, we need to meet our climate change goals. We need to stop heating our homes with gas and oil. We want to be supplying more electricity so that we can actually, there'll be a household benefit in terms of actually being, our processes being electrified. But at the same time, we don't want to do it at the expense of your community, which is going to have, massive pylons here. So how do we, I guess in Scotland, we've got National Performance Framework 4, which is the planning processes have to be the impact of on communities. However you define communities, the impact of communities must be assessed as part of the planning application. So we use the planning laws in there. Obviously, smaller scale planning decisions for electricity will be at the council, municipality council level. The larger ones will come to my ministerial desk. But before they even get to my ministerial desk, there's a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done in terms of the environmental impact of those, the visual impact, the noise impact, whatever, and the data associated with that. One of the things that I feel that we need to be doing better is sharing the data, because what you can have is you can have conflicting data. And particularly in the offshore sphere, where you could have NGOs can take a decision made by Scottish ministers on, for example, an offshore wind development. So you can have an NGO that is responsible for advocating for sea wildlife, taking a development to court because their data says that the impact that they're having is not the impact that they have said in their application. And that can put that development in stasis for a number of years. Meanwhile, we've got a 2030 target of 75% reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions. So what do? I think we have to have robust data. We need to be collating that data so that we have the data that everyone can trust as much as possible. And we need to be putting the right things in the right place as much as possible, and bringing communities with them. And those developers have to, even before their application goes in, they have to be embedded in those communities, talking to those communities in a way that is adaptive to those communities' concerns, and not just go with a plan that says we're going to put all these pylons here and that's just what we're going to do. They need to be able to answer the concerns of those communities and explain why they're doing it, and maybe make modifications to their plans before they even put that application in based on those conversations.
Thank you. Permanent Secretary.
I think I will let it go.
It's very difficult to put this into a law, in my opinion. You must talk with the people, try to explain for them, as you said, negotiate, instead of put it in a law, because this is so difficult questions. So, I can't see that putting it in a law is the way forward.
Thank you. On this very optimistic for a law note, I think we're going to have to finish. We can continue the discussion, I think, in a corridor. And I would like to thank the panel for their participation today. Round of applause.